The saloon doors groaned open, and the laughter, music, and clinking glasses dropped into a hush sharp enough to cut through bone. Dust clung to her boots, her thin dress fluttered in the smoky air, and her trembling hands hung at her sides as if chained by invisible irons. Her name was Evelyn Hart, 30 years old, though the years had carved deeper than time should allow. Poverty aged her in ways no mirror could soften, her eyes dimmed not from lack of beauty, but from nights of hunger, fear, and endless sacrifice. Tonight, her face was pale as chalk, her lips cracked, yet her spine carried a determination that made the drunkest cowhands sober their gaze. She had never been inside the saloon. She had passed it countless times, dragging Daniel by the hand, keeping him from staring at the painted women in the windows or the men who stumbled out smelling of smoke and sin. Yet here she was, offering the only thing she had left to bargain with. Her younger brother Daniel was all she had. Barely 16, fever-ridden, his breaths rattling like brittle paper in the dark of their tiny shack. The doctor had spoken without mercy. Without medicine, he won't see sunrise. The medicine cost $20. 20. To Evelyn, it might as well have been the weight of the moon. She had begged the shopkeeper, pleaded with neighbors, even considered stealing until the sheriff's cold eyes warned her back. In the end, word spread of her desperation, word always did in towns like these, and a man in the saloon whispered his price. Her first night, every step she took across the saloon floor was a funeral march for her pride. Whiskey stung her nose, laughter gnawed at her courage. Boots scuffed against the warped floorboards, and somewhere a piano played an out-of-tune waltz. The painted women in their feathered skirts leaned against posts and railings, their eyes flicking with pity, envy, or cruel amusement. The men looked at her the way wolves look at a lamb that has wandered too far from the flock. She forced herself forward, through the heavy smoke, toward the back room where the deal waited. She could almost feel Daniel's hot, trembling hand in hers, his voice whispering, "Don't do anything foolish, Evie, please." But he didn't know what a woman would do when cornered by fate. He didn't know how much she loved him enough to break herself. Enough to bleed. At the back table sat Clint Merrow, a rancher with a reputation as sharp as his spurs. His eyes were pale blue and cruel, his lips twisted with a grin that made her stomach knot. A stack of coins glimmered on the table, heavy enough to pay the doctor twice over. "You came," he said, voice dripping with triumph. "I knew you would." Evelyn swallowed, her throat dry as the desert. "The money first. I'll not step foot upstairs until I see it in my hand." A few men nearby chuckled, nudging one another, enjoying the theater of her humiliation. Clint tapped the coins, letting them clink together like shackles. "You'll get what's promised, girl, but you'll keep your word. A night with me, that's the bargain." Her heart pounded so loud it seemed the whole room must hear it. She nodded stiffly, though every nerve in her body screamed against the agreement. She was not ready for what was to come, but Daniel's face, sweaty, pale, and innocent, rose before her, and she held her ground. But outside, under the saloon's lantern glow, a figure leaned in the shadows. His hair was long, black as raven feathers, falling loose across broad shoulders scarred by battles most men would never survive. His chest was bare beneath the leather strap of his bow, his skin bronzed by sun, his muscles carved by years of survival rather than vanity. Around his neck hung tribal jewelry that caught faint glimmers of moonlight. His name was Takoda, an Apache warrior. He had followed Evelyn for 3 nights now, unseen, watching the way desperation drove her closer and closer to ruin. To the townsfolk, he was nothing but a savage, a threat lurking beyond the horizon. But to Evelyn, though she did not yet know it, he would soon become something far more dangerous, a man who believed she belonged to him, not to any rancher with silver to spare. As Evelyn reached for the coins, Clint grabbed her wrist, yanking her toward the stairs. The saloon roared with crude laughter, glasses slammed, boots stomped. Her body tensed like a deer caught in a trap, but she forced her chin high, refusing to let them see her break. Takoda's hand flexed against the hilt of his knife, his breath slow and steady. Tonight would not end as Clint Marrow imagined. Tonight, a claim would be challenged and blood might be spilled. The stairs creaked beneath Evelyn Hart's boots as Clint Marrow dragged her upward, his grip tight on her wrist, his breath sour with whiskey. Every step away from the saloon's noise was a step closer to the point of no return. The upstairs hallway smelled of stale perfume and sweat. The doors along the corridor were shut, muffled laughter and muffled cries leaking through. Evelyn's throat tightened. Her pride was slipping from her like sand through desperate fingers. "It's for Daniel," she reminded herself, biting down on the fear. Her brother's pale, fevered face filled her mind. Without medicine, he wouldn't survive the night. That thought was the only thread keeping her upright as Clint shoved her into the narrow room at the end of the hall. The room was lit by a single oil lamp, its flame wavering as though it shared her trembling. A narrow bed sagged against the wall, the quilt patched and stained with stories Evelyn didn't dare imagine. The window rattled faintly in the night breeze, the muffled saloon music drifting faintly upward. Clint shut the door with a heavy thud and leaned against it, smiling the way a coyote smiles when it corners its prey. "Well now," he drawled, peeling off his gloves one finger at a time. "I've been waiting for this. Never thought I'd see Evelyn Hart in my bed. Seems your pride wasn't worth much after all." His words stung, but Evelyn refused to let him see her break. She lifted her chin, her voice steady though her heart raced. "You've got what you wanted. Give me the medicine money and let this be done." Clint's laugh was low and cruel. "Oh, it'll be done when I say so." He tossed the pouch of coins onto the knit stand, letting them spill out in a gleaming heap. "There's your payment. Now be a good girl." Evelyn's stomach churned. She forced her feet to move, each step heavy, her body trembling with every breath. Her hand brushed the coins, their cold weight a cruel reminder of the price of survival. She thought of Daniel again, his coughing, his thin chest heaving for air. Tears blurred her vision, but before Clint could take another step toward her, the window burst inward with a sudden crack of glass and a rush of wind. Evelyn gasped, stumbling back against the wall. Clint cursed, spinning toward the noise, his hand flying to the pistol at his hip. From the shattered frame stepped a figure tall, broad, powerful. The lamp's glow flickered across a muscular, shirtless Apache warrior, his long black hair whipping in the breeze, tribal jewelry glinting against his chest. His eyes burned with a fire that made the room feel suddenly too small, too fragile to contain him. It was Takoda. For 3 nights he had watched Evelyn from the shadows. For 3 nights he had tracked her steps, seen the desperation in her face, and understood what she was about to give away. Tonight he would not remain silent. Clint pulled his pistol, rage twisting his features. "Savage," he spat. "You'll regret stepping foot in here." Takoda moved faster than Evelyn's eyes could follow. His hand struck Clint's wrist, the pistol clattering to the floorboards. In the same breath, Takoda shoved him back against the wall, pinning him as though he were nothing more than a rag doll. Evelyn froze, her heart pounding. Fear and relief crashed over her in equal measure. Takoda's voice was low, steady, each word edged with iron. "She is not yours." Clint struggled, his face red with fury. "She sold herself, damn you." "She's mine tonight, I paid for it." Takoda's gaze flicked to Evelyn, then back to Clint. His jaw tightened. "A woman cannot be bought." "Not her." "Not this one." Evelyn's breath caught. She had never seen anyone look at her that way, with conviction, with claim, as if she were more than her hunger, more than her desperation. Clint spat blood from a split lip, sneering. "You think she belongs to you, savage? You've no place here." Takoda leaned closer, his voice dropping to a growl. Then I will make a place." The tension in the room crackled like a storm about to break. Evelyn pressed a hand to her chest, struggling to understand what was happening. She had come here ready to sacrifice herself to save Daniel, but now everything had shifted. Takoda released Clint suddenly, shoving him hard enough that he stumbled across the room, crashing into the knit stand. Coins scattered, ringing across the floor like judgment. The warrior turned to Evelyn, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "You will not do this," he said firmly. "Not for him. Not for anyone." Her lips parted, but no words came. She stood trembling in the lamplight, the weight of his words pressing into her soul. Clint scrambled to his feet, rage in his eyes and his hand reaching for the fallen pistol. Evelyn's gasp filled the room. Takoda's muscles tensed. Blood would spill before this night was over. Clint's hand clawed for the pistol, his fingers brushing the metal just as Takoda lunged. The room erupted into chaos. The lamp flickered wildly, shadows danced across the walls, and Evelyn's scream tangled with the roar of boots on the creaking floorboards. Takoda's foot came down hard, pinning the pistol beneath his heel before Clint could grasp it. In one fluid motion, he swung his arm and struck Clint across the jaw. The rancher collapsed sideways, the crack of his head against the wooden wall echoing like gunfire. "Enough!" Takoda's voice thundered, deep and steady, like stone rolling down a canyon. But Clint was stubborn. He spat blood onto the floorboards, staggering to his feet, rage burning hotter than pain. "You think you can take her from me, savage? I paid. She belongs to me tonight." Evelyn flinched at the words. She wanted to vanish, to sink into the floor and never rise again. She had agreed to the bargain, yet now standing here, with Clint snarling and Takoda looming, everything felt twisted and wrong. Takoda stepped forward, placing himself between Clint and Evelyn. His broad, bare back shielded her, the corded muscles shifting as he squared his shoulders. The feathers and beads woven into his tribal necklace swayed with his movement, catching the lamplight. He raised his chin, his dark eyes fixed on Clint. "She is not property," Takoda said, his tone carrying both judgment and fire. "No coin can buy her. She belongs to herself." The word struck Evelyn harder than Clint's threats ever had. No man in this town had ever spoken of her that way. Not the preacher, not the doctor, not the sheriff. She was always the poor girl, the desperate woman, the one who would break before she bent the world. But Takoda, this stranger, saw something else. Clint roared and charged, fists flying. The two men collided with a force that shook the room. Takoda absorbed the blows like a mountain endures storms, then answered with a savage punch that sent Clint crashing into the knit stand again, splintering wood and scattering more coins. Evelyn pressed herself against the wall, her hands trembling, tears streaking her cheeks. She had come prepared to surrender her body for Daniel's life, but now she was watching blood spill on the floor, violence crashing down because of her. Clint groaned, but his fury wouldn't die. He lunged again, grabbing for a shard of broken glass from the window. He slashed wildly, catching Takoda across the arm. Blood streamed down the warrior's bronze skin, but he didn't falter. His eyes narrowed, his lips curling in a low growl. In a blur, Takoda seized Clint's wrist, twisting until the rancher cried out, dropping the shard. With a final shove, Takoda slammed him into the floor, pinning him with a knee across his chest. "You speak of payment," Takoda hissed, his voice low and dangerous. "Then hear mine. If you touch her again, you will pay with your life." Clint writhed, but Takoda's strength was uncheckable. The saloon downstairs stirred, boots pounding the floor, voices shouting questions. Word of the fight was spreading. Evelyn's breath came ragged, her hands clutching her chest. "Please," she whispered, stepping forward, her voice breaking. "Stop this before you kill him." Takoda's gaze flicked up to her. In his eyes, she saw more than anger. She saw a promise, ancient and unyielding. Slowly he rose, releasing Clint with a shove that left the rancher coughing on the floor. Clint glared up at them both, his face twisted in humiliation. "This isn't over, woman. You'll regret this. Both of you." He staggered to his feet, clutching his side, and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Silence fell, broken only by Evelyn's trembling breaths and the dripping of blood from Takoda's arm. She backed away, fear and gratitude warring in her chest. "Why? Why would you do this?" Her voice was hoarse, her eyes searching his. "Why follow me? Why stop him?" Takoda turned toward her, the fire in his gaze softening but never fading. He bound his wound with a strip of cloth torn from his belt, his movements calm and steady. "Because," he said, his deep voice carrying the weight of truth, "I saw what you were about to give away, and I could not allow it." Evelyn shook her head, clutching her arms around herself. "You don't even know me." Takoda stepped closer, not menacing but certain, each word deliberate. "I know enough. Your courage. Your sacrifice. The way you walked into that room with fear in your eyes but steel in your spine. That is worth more than any man's silver." Her throat tightened. "Daniel, my brother. He'll die without that medicine." Takoda nodded once, firmly. "Then he will not die." Evelyn blinked. "What do you mean?" Takoda's dark eyes held hers with a weight that stole her breath. "I will see him healed. But hear me, Evelyn Hart." His voice dropped to a near growl. "From this night forward, you are not Clint Meros, not any man's. You walk under my protection now." The words slammed into her chest, heavy and frightening. Her heart pounded as she realized the truth. She had escaped one claim, only to step into another, but Takoda's was different. His was not of coin or lust. His was of blood, fire, and destiny. The night air was cool when Evelyn Hart stepped out of the saloon, her hands still shaking from the storm that had passed. The echoes of Clint Meros' threats clung to her ears, his words sharper than knives. Yet beside her walked Takoda, silent and steady, the moonlight painting his bronze skin and the tribal jewelry across his chest in silver fire. He had bled for her. He had stood between her and ruin. And now he walked at her side as though he had always belonged there. Evelyn tightened her shawl around her shoulders. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered. "You've made an enemy of Clint. He won't forgive this." Takoda's eyes never left the horizon. "I have made enemies before." His calm unnerved her. Everything about him unnerved her. The way he carried himself like stone carved by storms. The way his dark gaze seemed to pierce her thoughts. Yet beneath her unease, a spark of something else flickered. Something she dared not name. They walked in silence, their boots crunching over the dirt road that led beyond town. Evelyn's little shack sat on the edge of the prairie, half-collapsed roof patched with tin, its walls warped by years of wind and rain. A single candle burned weakly in the window. Daniel was still awake. Her throat tightened. She wanted to send Takoda away, to keep her world small and private. But when she glanced at him, broad shoulders silhouetted against the stars, long black hair shifting in the night breeze, she knew there was no sending him anywhere. Takoda had decided. He would not leave her side. Inside, the air was heavy with sickness. Daniel lay on the narrow bed, his body swallowed by blankets, his skin pale with fever. His eyes fluttered open when he heard her footsteps. "Evya." His voice was faint, a broken whisper. She rushed to him, kneeling at his side, brushing damp hair from his brow. "I'm here, Danny. I've got you. You'll be all right." But Daniel's gaze shifted, landing on Takoda as he entered behind her. The boy's eyes widened, fear flashing across his face. "Evya and Apache?" Evelyn swallowed hard, glancing back at Takoda. He stood in the doorway, filling it entirely, his expression unreadable. He's not here to hurt us." Evelyn said softly, though her own voice shook with uncertainty. He saved me tonight. Daniel coughed, his thin chest rattling. Why? Takoda stepped forward, kneeling slowly by the bed. He studied the boy with the same fierce intensity he had shown Clint Marrow. Then, carefully, he reached into the leather pouch at his side and drew out a bundle of herbs wrapped in cloth. He is sick, Takoda said, his deep voice calm, steady. These will help. Evelyn blinked. Medicine? Takoda nodded. From my people. Stronger than what your doctor sells for silver. He crushed the herbs in his hand, releasing a sharp, earthy scent that filled the room. Evelyn watched as he mixed them into water from the jug by the bed. His movements were practiced, careful, almost reverent. When he held the cup to Daniel's lips, the boy hesitated, looking to his sister. Evelyn touched his hand gently. Drink, Danny, please. Daniel obeyed, sipping weakly. The bitterness twisted his face, but he swallowed. Within minutes, his breathing steadied and a calmer rhythm settled into his chest. He drifted into sleep, the fever's edge already easing. Evelyn stared at him, stunned. She turned to Takoda, her lips parting. How? You could have saved him all along. Takoda looked at her, his dark eyes steady. I told you. He would not die. Her chest tightened. Gratitude warred with fear inside her. She wanted to thank him, to fall to her knees and weep, but another thought gnawed at her. Why? Why go this far? You don't even know us. Why follow me? Why claim me in front of Clint? Takoda rose slowly, his presence filling the tiny shack until it felt like the walls themselves might give way. Because, he said, his voice low and resolute, I saw a woman who would break herself to save another. That is strength. That is honor. I could not let you be taken by a man without either. Evelyn's pulse raced. And now? What happens now? Do you think I belong to you just because you stopped him? Takoda stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. Not because I stopped him. Because I choose you. Because you walk with my protection now, Evelyn Hart, and no man will touch you again. Her breath caught. She looked at Daniel, sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks. She looked at Takoda, towering and unyielding, a man born of a world that did not forgive weakness. She had traded her first night for silver. Instead, she had been claimed by blood and fire, and she had no idea which fate was more dangerous. The dawn broke soft and gold over the prairie, but Evelyn felt no warmth in it. She sat on the stoop of her shack, her skirts drawn tightly around her knees, her hands clasped in restless prayer. Inside, Samuel stirred fitfully in his fevered sleep, the sound of his breathing shallow and uneven. She had grown used to that rhythm, a thin thread between life and death, and every gasp scraped at her heart. But what unsettled her more was the figure outside, standing like a sentinel against the wind. Takoda, the Apache warrior, had not left since the night he forced the rancher from her room. Evelyn had expected him to vanish, like smoke after a fire, but instead he stayed silent, deliberate, watchful. By morning, he had fetched water from the creek. By noon, he was grinding herbs she had never seen before. And now, as daylight stretched across the plains, he was still there, bare-chested, marked with tribal jewelry, long black hair whipping in the breeze, a presence too raw and powerful for her simple, fragile world. Evelyn rose at last, crossing to where he stood. Her voice was quiet, heavy with unease. You've done more than I could ever ask. But why? Why me? Why Samuel? Takoda's eyes lingered on the horizon before settling on her. His voice was deep, steady, carrying the weight of untold miles. Because I know what it is to watch families suffer and do nothing. I swore I would not let that happen again. Evelyn swallowed hard. His words struck something deep inside her, something beyond fear. Yet still her worry gnawed. The rancher, Luther Briggs, was not a man to forgive humiliation. Already, whispers in town must have spread about the poor girl who tried to sell her first night, about the Apache warrior who had claimed her instead. The law, the church, the townsfolk, they would all turn their eyes toward her shack, and none of them would be kind. As if sensing her thoughts, Takoda turned toward her door. He will come back. Not alone. Men like him always return with others. You must be ready. The words chilled her more than the morning wind. Ready? She asked. How can I ever be ready for that? I have nothing. Takoda stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. He was a storm contained in flesh, and yet when his gaze met hers, there was no cruelty there. Only truth. You have me, he said simply. Evelyn's breath caught. She wanted to believe him, but the weight of her poverty, her shame, and her desperation pressed against her like chains. To trust him meant more than risking her life. It meant surrendering what little she still controlled. Before she could reply, Samuel coughed violently inside, and she hurried back into the shack. Takoda followed, ducking beneath the low frame of the door. Together they leaned over the boy, Evelyn pressing a damp cloth to his forehead, while Takoda lifted him gently and held a cup of bitter-smelling water to his lips. Samuel grimaced but swallowed, too weak to resist. Evelyn watched the warrior's hands scarred, powerful hands that had likely wielded blades and bows, now holding her brother with surprising tenderness. Her throat tightened. No one had ever helped her carry Samuel's weight before. No one had stayed. Later, when the boy finally drifted into quieter rest, Evelyn sank into the corner of the room, exhausted. Takoda crouched opposite her, his presence filling the space. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence between them was not empty, it was alive, pulsing with questions neither dared ask. At last, Evelyn whispered, "If Briggs comes, if they all come, you'll fight them?" Takoda nodded once, his jaw set like stone. "I will fight. But protection always has a price." Her heart stumbled at those words. She lifted her gaze to him, her eyes searching his. "And what price will you ask of me?" He leaned closer, the lamplight tracing the lines of his face, the wild strength in him tempered by something almost sorrowful. "Not what you think," he said softly. "Your body is not a debt. I ask only for trust." Trust is the hardest gift of all. Evelyn's breath shuddered out. Tears stung her eyes, because in that moment she realized that the very thing she had tried to sell to save Samuel was not what this man wanted. Takoda's demand was heavier, more dangerous than silver coins or a single night. It was the opening of her guarded soul. Outside, the prairie winds rose, whispering like voices of the past. Somewhere in the distance, a horse's cry echoed. And Evelyn knew, with a trembling certainty, that the storm she had feared was coming faster than she could prepare for, but she was no longer facing it alone. The prairie dusk was not quiet that evening. Evelyn could hear it, the distant thrum of hooves rolling across the land like a storm. She froze at the sound, her heart leaping into her throat. The sky burned red with sunset, but in that glow, dark figures began to gather on the ridge. Riders. Men. Her breath hitched. "He's coming," she whispered. Takoda had been outside, stacking kindling for the night fire. At her words he straightened, his broad shoulders tightening, every muscle taut as a bowstring. He didn't need to look, he already knew. His people had taught him to read the land, to sense danger long before others. The air itself was warning him now. Evelyn clutched the doorframe, her hands trembling. "Luther Briggs," she said. "He's brought them." Takoda finally turned his head toward her, his long black hair catching the last light of day, his chest bare, the tribal jewelry at his neck glinting like talismans. His face was carved with calm resolve, but his eyes, dark, burning, unshaken, told her the truth. Yes, Briggs was coming. And he had not come alone. Stay inside, Takoda said, his voice steady, deep. Bar the door. Keep Samuel low. Do not make a sound. Evelyn shook her head violently, her braid tumbling loose. No, I can't just hide while they kill you. You will, he said, stepping closer, his presence filling the doorway, towering above her. His hand brushed her shoulder, not gentle but firm, commanding. Your brother needs you alive. If you fall, all of this is for nothing. Her chest ached at his words. She wanted to argue, but Samuel's cough rattled weakly from inside, pulling her back like an anchor. She bit her lip until she tasted blood, then nodded. Though her tears betrayed her fear, Takoda turned away, striding into the open, where the land stretched wide and merciless. The riders had drawn closer now, dust rising behind them. Luther Briggs led the charge, his wide-brimmed hat tilted low, his cruel grin visible even from a distance. At his side rode hired men, armed with rifles and whiskey courage. They slowed as they neared the shack, circling like wolves scenting prey. Briggs reined in his horse, his gaze sweeping over the fragile home, then landing on the lone figure standing unflinching before it. Well, Briggs called, his voice slick as oil. The little whore's got herself a guard dog. His men chuckled darkly. But you ain't but one man, Injin, and I've got 10. Takoda's chest rose and fell slowly. He said nothing at first, letting the silence stretch like a drawn blade. Then, in a voice that carried across the dry air, he answered, 10 men who do not know what they fight for are already less than one. The insult struck, and Briggs' smirk twisted into rage. He spat into the dust. Boys, take him. I'll deal with the girl myself. The riders spurred forward, rifles raising. Evelyn's scream tore from the shack as she clutched Samuel close, but the sound was drowned by the thunder of hooves. Takoda did not move until the first rider was nearly upon him. Then, like lightning cracking across a storm, he surged forward. His hand caught the reins, yanking the man clean from his saddle. The rider hit the earth hard, breath knocked from him. In one fluid motion, Takoda swung the fallen rifle into his grasp and fired. The shot rang out, echoing across the plains, sending horses screaming and men scrambling. Chaos erupted. Inside the shack, Evelyn pressed her hand over Samuel's mouth to muffle his whimper. Her own body shook, torn between terror and awe. She peeked through a crack in the boards, and what she saw seared itself into her soul. Takoda moving like a storm-given flesh, his body bronze and gleaming in the dying sun, his black hair a wild banner, his strength devastating. Every strike, every motion was precise, born not of rage, but of unyielding will. 1 man against 10, and yet for every rifle raised, another fell. But Luther Briggs was no fool. As the battle churned, he slipped from his horse, slinking toward the shack, pistol drawn. His eyes gleamed with cruelty. He would take what he had come for, warrior or no warrior. Evelyn turned, and there he was, at her door, her scream froze in her throat as he shoved the door inward. She shielded Samuel with her body, trembling, powerless. And then Takoda's shadow filled the doorway. His chest heaved, his face streaked with dust and blood, but his eyes burned brighter than fire itself. Briggs stumbled back, startled, raising his gun. But Takoda's hand was faster, wrenching it from his grip, sending it clattering across the dirt. The rancher spat curses, but Takoda's voice cut through them, low and final. You will not touch what is under my protection. The room held its breath. Evelyn's heart thundered. Samuel stirred weakly against her skirts, and outside the prairie wind howled, as if the land itself bore witness to the battle not yet finished. The prairie was quiet again, but it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence that follows destruction. Smoke drifted over the trampled grass. Horses snorted nervously in the distance. and the bodies of Briggs' hired men lay scattered beneath the fading starlight. Evelyn held Samuel close against her chest, her breath shaking with each inhale. She could still hear the thunder of hooves, the gunfire, the cruel laughter of Briggs echoing in her ears. But all of that was behind her now, for at the center of the chaos stood Takoda. He was battered, streaked with dust and blood, his long black hair tangled and heavy against his shoulders. His chest rose and fell, each breath deep and measured, but his stance remained unbroken, as if no number of men could ever bend him. In his hand was the pistol he had ripped from Briggs. In his eyes burned the fierce light of victory and something else Evelyn could not yet name. At Takoda's feet, Luther Briggs lay in the dirt, groaning, beaten. His lips split, his pride shattered. The once mighty rancher looked nothing like the man who had swaggered into her life with silver coins and a cruel smile. Takoda crouched beside him, his voice low but sharp as a blade. "You came for her. You came for the boy. But you leave with nothing but shame." Briggs spat, though even that was weak. "You think you can keep her? She's dirt. She's mine by right." Takoda's fist crashed into the earth beside Briggs' head, making the ground shudder. Evelyn startled, but Briggs flinched harder, his bravado crumbling. Takoda leaned close, his words a vow. "She belongs to no man. Not you. Not me. Not anyone. She is hers alone." Evelyn's breath caught. She had expected him to claim her, to demand payment in flesh or loyalty. Yet his words struck deeper than any wound. He was not here to own her, he was here to guard the choice she had nearly lost. Briggs cursed and writhed, but he was too broken to rise. Takoda rose instead, towering, casting his shadow over the rancher as if he were no more than a rotting weed. Then, without another word, he turned his back on the man and walked toward Evelyn. She trembled, tears shining on her cheeks. Samuel's frail body clutched to her chest. When Takoda stopped before her, she lifted her gaze to meet his. "You saved us," she whispered, her voice raw. Takoda shook his head slowly. "You saved yourselves. I only fought beside you." Her lips parted, but no words came. For in her heart she knew what he meant. She had chosen to endure. She had chosen to shield Samuel. She had chosen, against all odds, to trust this man when she could have sent him away. And somehow those choices had carved a path through the storm. The boy stirred in her arms, fevered but breathing easier, his small hands curling into her dress. Evelyn kissed his forehead and felt a trembling laugh escape her. Relief, fragile and sharp, broke through the wall of fear that had held her for so long. Takoda watched her, his face unreadable, though his dark eyes softened in the lamplight. He turned slightly, gesturing toward the horizon. "The dawn is coming. When it does, men will write again. Briggs may crawl back with more. You cannot stay here." Evelyn's heart twisted. The shack, fragile as it was, had been her only refuge. To leave it was to step into the unknown. Yet the truth was clear. This place was no longer home. It was a battlefield, soaked with blood and memory. She swallowed hard. Then where? Takoda's gaze lingered on her as if weighing her spirit. At last he said, "There is land my people still hold. Not much, but it is ours. There you and your brother would be safe." The words hung heavy between them. Safety, something Evelyn had never dared to imagine. But could she follow this man into a world she did not understand? Could she entrust Samuel's fragile life to a warrior whose presence terrified and steadied her in equal measure? Her lips trembled, but then she looked at Samuel, at his pale face, and the decision rose in her chest like breath after drowning. She nodded. "If you'll guide us, we'll go." For the first time, Takoda's expression shifted into something close to a smile, not wide, not careless, but quiet and certain, like dawn breaking through storm clouds. "Then you have given me your trust," he said. "That is the only price I ever asked." Evelyn's tears fell freely now, not of fear but of release. She tightened her hold on Samuel and stepped closer, so close she could feel the heat radiating from Takoda's battered body, smell the earth and smoke clinging to his skin. And in that moment, under the bruised sky of the prairie, surrounded by the ashes of night, Evelyn knew she was no longer the poor girl who had once been willing to sell her first night for her brother's life. She was something more. She was a woman who had chosen. A woman who had survived, and beside her stood a warrior who had claimed nothing but the right to walk with her into whatever dawn awaited them.